Hello, everybody. Once again, I'm Liam Crafton Jr., aka Zorvachan Less Than Guru, and today I would like to talk about my sword mage. So I say my sword mage, and what I mean by that is my reworking of the D&D 4th edition sword mage from the Forgotten Realms setting book was a character class that I just fell in love with. I just loved the idea of a person who could learn spells like a wizard, like a mage, by reading scrolls and uh, out of spell books, etc., but who used their magic as a combat mage, as opposed to a battle mage. What I see the difference is a battle mage is casting big spells like River in Palladium First Edition, say the River of Lava, things that affect armies and explode battlefields. So that to me is like a battle mage, crowd control, you could say. The the combat mage is like a fighter mage, and since Palladium already had the gladiator, which is an entertainer, fighter, and my interpretation of the paladin for my first edition game is a combination of the Holy Crusader and the paladin from Palladium first edition as a fighter clergy member. I also wanted to have a fighter mage type. So, having really liked the ideas behind the sword mage in D&D 4th edition, I converted that. So, this is that conversion. So, the attribute requirements are IQ of 10, which I believe are the same as the wizard, PE of 10, PP of 12, and PS of 10. So, you are going to have the intellect to be a mage, but the PE, PP, and PS to be a fighter type character, a man of arms. So, alignment, any good, evil, selfish, that doesn't matter. Physical conditioning, since you are a fighter, it is more than just like the Mystic Scholar, which was 0. So I give them a +6 because that is an intricate part of the character, but it's not all that that character does. So that's why it's not a +8 like the majority of my men of arms. Armor tier is tier 3. They are not trained in armor because they use magical abilities for that and no restrictions. So the occupational skills that they automatically get, spell casting, they start with spells. Unlike the Mystic Scholar, they do start with a handful of spells or a few spells. Then they get hand to hand knight because they are a really good combatant. So there's various things that could get hand to hand knight, depending. So instead of coming up with their own hand to hand stance, I thought knight was appropriate. Mystic combat wizard, so they can go into a hand to hand stance and fight like a knight, or they have to, if they want to cast spells and stuff, they go into a mystic stance and cast spells like a wizard. They have to choose every melee round. They're going to choose: am I going to be fighting or am I going to cast spells? So a lot of the sword mage things, what they would do is they would buff themselves, get themselves better for combat, and then use that with their combat abilities instead of having to have somebody else buff them. Um, and then they can get either a short sword or long sword. They are a sword mage. That was one thing that I hemmed and hawed about. Do I want it to be specific sword, or do I want to allow them to do maces or halbergs? And I kind of determined that I wanted to keep the sword type thing, but they could use any. They can use rapiers. They can use short swords. They can use bastard swords, two-handed swords. So it's just that type of thing. Um, and then they can get decipher magic as a spell. So that is their spell, decipher magic. Figure out. They train themselves to get certain mystical abilities related to the sword in combat, but decipher magic is a way that they can then cast the spell, convert the spell, and learn new spells. So level 1, they get 8 elective skills and 8 secondary skills, similar to what other occupations do. Level 2, they get an ability, Weapon Augment, which we'll go through all the abilities in a moment. Level 3 is they get to choose one elective skill, starts at level 1, and Fourth, they get Whirling Blade. Fifth, they get Armor Augment. Sixth, they get one additional hit point, shock point, and magic point. So sometimes you'll see as we get into other of the academic classes or the clergy, they'll get additional magic points or additional ISP for my Intuits. And you've seen, if you've watched my uh, entertainers, rogues, and men of arms, they get additional shock points and hit points. So the sword mage doing all, they're going to get a bit of everything, but it's only going to be 1 point each. Then at 7, they get melee spell. At 8, they get to choose one secondary spell, or sorry, secondary skill. 9, elemental crash. 10, one secondary skill. And if you notice, they don't get as many skills at those levels that a lot of the other occupations are, because they're having to split their time with the same amount of experience to gain levels, or a similar chunk of experience as kind of a knight and a wizard, going down the experience chart, so they don't have time. They're basically more occupied, so they're getting less skill. And then elemental crash at 9, choose a secondary skill at 10, mystic parry at 11, at 12 an elective skill. 13 and 14, they get their one hit point, shock point, and magic point. And then 15 is sword burst. So these elective skills listed here, just like in all Palladium First Edition, those are the skills you're allowed to take. And the secondary skills are, you can choose anything from the list, the general list for everybody. These are the skills that you get bonuses with. Now let's go on to the abilities. So the Sword Mage does have a lot of abilities to make them a little more unique, and not just a knight and a wizard. Otherwise, I would have just allowed multi-classing at the same time instead of having to dual class. Is kind of how switching occupations work. With those old school rules, it was the dual class that humans could do, and the multi-classing was 2 at the same time, which is what the non-humans could do in old school D&D. So instead of it just being a similar multi-classing, I wanted them to have a unique personality for this occupation. So armor augment they get at 5th level, and the sword mage at 5th level can spend an action to increase the armor rating of light armor by 2 points. This increases by an additional point at level 7, 10, and 13, and it lasts one round per level, and costs 10 magic points. So at 5th level, they get to, if they wear light armor, which gives some penalties because they're tier 2, but not a terrible amount of penalties, their armor rating increases by 2. It's like they've infused their armor to protect some of the gaps and holes and stuff in the armor. They start off with automatic parry, so a sword mage has an automatic parry if they are wielding only one non-two-handed sword and not wearing heavy armor. So, as I stated, all my men of arms, their thing of being a man of arms and their like ability and special unique thing is they all get auto parry. With my occupations like the gladiator or the paladin and the sword mage and my cleric, they need to be able to get some type of auto parry to be sustainable as a combination class. But I didn't want to give them the outright, you get it all day and all night. So with the sword mage, they have to use a sword. Even though they could do things two-handed with it, with this automatic parry, they have to have it in one hand to be a little more nimble, to be able to parry and stuff, and they can't wear heavy armor, so that kind of keeps them in their light armor. And then at 5th level, with that armor augment, that kind of sets the stage for that. Elemental Crash is the 9th level skill, and when they hit a target, they can spend 5 magic points to make the damage of their weapon fire, cold, or electricity, and then they can hit another target within 10 feet with the same attack roll, and 3d6 damage of the same, whether it's fire, cold, or electricity. So it's augmenting their damage. They channel an elemental force through it, and what would be called the spell elemental magic, um, that they can do, and that's an ability that they get, so they can use that in that hand-to-hand stance without having to cast spells to do it. It's just an automatic thing that they can do. They get magic points, so this is how they get magic points. Um, most occupations that I have with magic points get their MA times 2 plus 30. So the sword mage gets a little bit less. Um, so then let's go to melee spell. Melee spell is 7th level. The sword mage can cast one spell in the hand-to-hand knight stance. The rules on spell failure in melee combat and taking damage still apply. So they could cast a spell, but if they take damage, there's a rule that there's something like a 90 or something percent chance that you can't cast the spell because you're in pain, you get hurt. It goes back to old school D&D. That still applies, but you don't have to switch to cast one spell. If you're going with your wizard at 5th level, they get 2 spells that they can do in a round. They would still have to go to a wizard stance to do that 2 spells per round, but they could do one in the hand-to-hand, and that's at 7th level, which is pretty high up there for most of the games I've played. I've only had a couple of players ever get to that level. Mystic Parry, that doesn't have a level associated with it, so that is actually it should be level 11. So I will make a note and correct that in my PDF. So that's something that happens whenever you write officially for yourself. You will make mistakes and you will catch it. So seeing that, I thought I read it. If normally like automatic parry, that doesn't have one, that means they get it at 1st level. So I need to do that. Mystic Parry, 11th level, so quite a high level ability. They can parry incoming mystic attacks directed at them that require a targeting roll, even if the spell normally cannot be parried. And things that I don't allow normal parries with are, say, fireballs. You can't really parry that with a short sword. Now, I do allow shields in certain cases to parry those effects, but not just with your sword. And since a sword mage doesn't use shields, that would be something that they couldn't do. So this way they can use their sword as a shield, basically, is what is going on, or to be able to parry it. Spell knowledge are gained through the scroll conversion skill or learning by being taught, like happens in regular Palladium, whether that is by another wizard, a mystic scholar that might have it, another sword mage, a priest who gets a divine intervention. Any of those can be used, and sword mages may learn spells only starting at level 2 and can only learn spells equal to their occupation level. So besides decipher magic, which they start with, they don't start with any other spells, and they can't start learning spells until level 2. So it is going to take them a while. But like the mystic scholar, they can only learn spells up to their level. And again, that purpose is to allow wizards who don't get some of this neat little funky stuff that they can do still be kind of the main, the attraction. Why would you be this when these other things have these nice little flashy things? Is because you can learn any spell whatsoever, period, that spell magic. Even at 1st level, you can learn Death Spell, which is a 10th level spell at 1st level. You can learn a Spell of Legend at 1st level. It might be difficult, might take you a long time through your scroll conversion or being taught, but you can do it. So that spell knowledge. Sword Burst, which is the 15th level ability, is they can spend 10 magic points and roll one sword attack, a strike, and this attack is used against all opponents adjacent to the sword mage. So it's kind of like a multi-attack type thing. You roll once. If you had a character point, I would allow you to spend a character point on that one roll. And then depending on what that total roll was and the armor rating and or parries or dodges against that would determine who got hit or not. But it's one roll to hit multiple opponents.
So that is really powerful, but that's also why it's a 15th level ability. Weapon augment. This is the second level one. So the sword mage gains a +1 bonus to strike and parry with a sword, and a +1 to dodge. These bonuses increase by +1 at level 6, 11, and 15. So if you start off with 1 at 6, 11, and 15, you got a +4 with swords. That's what they're attuned to. It's not a huge bonus, but it does add. And there's so many times when something either missed or hit by 1 point that is a decent ability. And since they can't use some of like the or later on two-handed swords which do more damage aren't available to have all these cool things work with, they can use the say arming sword or even a bastard sword because you can switch. It's kind of cheating. It's a cheating I know about and I approve of. But a hand and a half sword, one-handed sword, whether that's large or short sword, because Palladium divides long swords as being both one-handed swords, hand and a half swords, and two-handed swords. But as long as you have the one-handed or hand and a half, you can use that with the weapon augment, since the sword itself doesn't do as much damage as a full two-handed sword like a Zweihander or something. Then this is kind of an offset, not to damage, but to make sure that you hit so that you can do damage. So that's kind of the balance there. Whirling Blade is fourth. They can throw their weapon at a target and do +2 damage. So whatever the normal damage they do, +2. If the attack misses, you can direct the blade to attack another target within range. The blade returns to the sword mage's hand after a hit or a third miss. So if you fail hitting that, you throw it. You have to use your thrown ability. So you'd use your hand-to-hand stance, which that 2 strike I don't allow with throws, but you could use your weapon proficiency throw, any targeting that you have that as a skill. And if it's even allowed, I have targeting, so targeting is allowed. You can use that with it. If you don't hit, you can choose another opponent, and then you can see if it hits that. And then if it doesn't, then you can try a third. If it doesn't, it comes back to you at the end. If you hit the first guy, it just hits the first guy. It doesn't move to a second or third, but that's another thing that they get. So the sword mage, not like the battle mage River of Lava, unless they use their one spell or go to a wizard stance and then be a battle mage, this still allows them to affect multiple people as a sword mage. So that's basically what they do. Having said that, hopefully that can give you inspiration of using this character class, this OCC, in your own game or modifying it how you see it, or just being an introduction to how you can create your own occupational character classes, or in my case, I just call them occupation. Having said that, once again, I'm Lee McCraft Engineer, aka Zorval John Less Than Guru, and until next time, I will catch you later.